No matter how long you've been doing this author thing, you're going to run into new situations where you have to take action, but you don't know what to do. Now, when you're new, this happens a lot more. But I've been doing this for years, and it's happening to me as we speak. For anyone who's new to the channel, my name is Seth. I'm a full-time fantasy author. I've written 22 books, and I make these videos because there are a lot of bad books out there, and I don't want yours to be one of them. The fact of the matter is, you're always going to run into situations where you have to do something new, and it's going to be uncomfortable. When I started writing, everything was uncomfortable. I didn't know how to write a good story. I didn't know if the topic of my story was going to be interesting to anybody else besides myself. I didn't know how to post it. I didn't know how to get feedback on it. I didn't understand how to monetize it. I didn't understand how to advertise it. I didn't know where to find readers or how to encourage them to give me feedback or leave reviews. I just didn't understand anything about anything. And so, for me, everything was uncomfortable. But the longer I've done this, the more I've learned bits and pieces of the business, and the more I've understood how to do things. And so now I'm very comfortable writing a story. I never think to myself, is this going to be good? Because I can tell whether it's going to be good or not. And if it's going to be bad, I fix it or I redo it because I have the skill set to do that. I've developed that skill set over time. But just recently, I stepped into a new facet of this whole author thing, and that is book launches. I have somehow avoided having to do a full book launch up until this point. And the reality is that I probably could have muddled through this launch as well, the same way I muddle through every other single launch that I've ever done, which is do a little bit of promotion, like the barest minimum, and then just pretend that I didn't put the book out and hope that people will find it and read it. But as I was getting ready to release Dreamer's Throne Book 1, which is this brand new series, I thought to myself, I should really learn how to do this whole book launch thing. I see other people doing book launches and they're killing it. And I want that kind of attention for my book because attention gets you traffic, traffic gets you readers, readers become fans, and then you can sell books to them forever. As long, of course, as you continue to deliver good books. So the question I set out to answer was, how do I even do this whole book launch thing? And I'm going to do an entire video breakdown on the book launch, how it went. I'm building out a checklist, and I'm going to be giving that to you guys. Not in this video, but in a future video. So definitely subscribe so you don't miss it. But today I want to talk about discomfort because, man, I have just been feeling uncomfortable. It's so weird to be like, oh, I am a full-time author. I know how to do this, but at the same time, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm way over my head. And I have these jitters every time I try to take the next step. It would be a lot easier for me to just say, I'm not going to do it. But I also know that I only got to where I am right now by being willing to be uncomfortable, by being willing to embrace that discomfort of not knowing if I'm going to do the right thing or if I'm going to mess it up. So I want to share with you a really simple framework that I use to help myself walk through this path, this uncomfortable path of learning a new skill. Because the reality is that what I'm doing is just learning a skill. There's information that I don't know, that I need to know in order to do a proper book launch. The question is, how do I find out that information? There are two ways to find it out. I can go look around and ask people, hey, how do you do a book launch? And they tell me, and then I have the knowledge of how to do a book launch. What I don't have is the experience. So when I start to take those steps, I'm still going to feel jittery because I have the knowledge but not the experience. On the other hand, if I can make myself take those steps, then I'll gain the experience, That knowledge is going to be internalized, and I will understand myself, okay, this is how I do a book launch. For me, the first step is pretty easy. You look around, you collect a bunch of lists on book launches, and then, hey presto, you have a complete list of all the things you're supposed to do for a book launch. The question is, will any of them work for me? Well, there's only one way to find out. And so over the last 3 weeks, that's what I've been doing. I have been trying to find out. After looking through all of those lists on how to do a book launch, I decided for me that the thing I wanted to focus on this time was influencers. Trying to find people who have their own audiences who can read and review the book and promote it to their audience. And I thought, you know what? Why not try it? I'm going to see if this works. So after getting a list together, I started sending messages out. And this brings us to the first piece of this mental model. Plan for your second attempt to be correct. So what does that mean? It means that when I sent out my first message, I knew I was going to miss things. When I sent out my third message, I realized that I needed to clarify one of the sentences. And so I did. I didn't go back and change those first two messages. I didn't wait to send those first two messages until I knew that everything was perfect. I just sent the first two messages. Guess what? They didn't respond. And that's okay. The third person who I sent the message to, I tweaked the message to be clearer on what I was actually asking, and I did get a response. They didn't agree to do it, which is okay, because I took what they said to me and why they weren't going to do it, and I used that to tweak my message even further. And so the fourth and fifth and sixth people that I sent to were getting an improved version of my message, asking them to do this book review. And this progressed all the way through. I didn't try to make my first attempt perfect. I tried to make a first attempt. And if you can do this, if you can plan for your second attempt to be the one that's successful, it allows you to have the freedom to just say, hey, this is a test. I'm just trying this, right? I'm gaining experience on what works and what doesn't work so that I can improve what I'm doing to the point that I can't help but be successful. And so I operate with that mentality. Well, my future attempts are going to be successful because I'm making all my mistakes now. And this way of thinking actually applies to my entire attempt to launch this book. I don't think I'm going to have wild success because I'm making a lot of mistakes with this book launch. But I have a book launch coming up next year, and it's going to crush. Why is it going to crush? How do I know that? Well, it's going to crush because I'm making all my mistakes now. And so I'm going to have that checklist that's rock solid, that works for me. I'm going to have a list of influencers who I know I can do business with because they've responded to me and I understand their requirements. I'm going to know what I need to know experientially to be able to succeed. So anytime you're setting out to do something new and you feel that tension inside yourself, just think to yourself, okay, this one's not going to work, but the next one is absolutely going to work because I'm going to learn everything I need to know in this attempt. This is similar to that idea of extending your time horizon. It's just a slightly more nuanced version of it for learning new skills. And that brings us to the second piece of this mental model, which is make your mistakes as fast as possible. Again, I didn't wait to start sending out the first message until I had a perfectly crafted request. Instead, I just started sending them out as fast as possible. And I adjust each and every single one to be better. And this works. Of the 100 messages that I sent over the last 2 weeks, I've gotten almost all of my replies from the back half of that list because I've made different mistakes all the way through that first 50 messages. So I know how I'm supposed to be approaching the back half of my list. And I'm continuing to do that. I'm continuing to search for people and ask influencers if they can help me expand my network. And I'm doing it in a way that's allowing me to make my mistakes as quickly as possible, so I learn as quickly as possible. And this can be applied to literally anything. Any kind of skill that you're trying to learn, any new area that you're stepping into that you've never engaged with before, you can do this. As long as you're smart about how you're making your mistakes and you're making very, very small mistakes, you can make a ton of them really rapidly and nobody is going to care. I know that might sound hard to believe, but that's the reality. Is if you make a ton of really small mistakes, but you approach it as a learner, as somebody who is attempting to do something they've never done before, it's amazing how much grace people have for you and how much they'll help you along, pointing things out that you wouldn't have noticed that you could improve. And that's what happened to me. Over the last 3 weeks, I have been stepping out of my comfort zone. I've been trying this new thing, and we'll see how it goes. But the reality is that I don't really care how it goes, because I know that my future releases, when I do this again for new series in the future, they're going to crush. I hope you can use this mental model in your life as well. Remember, plan for your second attempt to be successful and make your mistakes as fast as you possibly can.